Welcome to this special report from Channel 16 News. I'm Robert Rohr. Today we'll take a closer look at BOGALAND. Once a safe, peaceful, and prosperous nation, home to millions of people, it is now a country in crisis. BOGALAND constitutes a region known as the North Friendly Sea Area. Since the 1950s, a conflict has been steadily growing there. The origins of the unrest can be traced to the oil-rich province of Mida, where many claim there is a disproportionate allocation of wealth to other regions. But in 1973, there was a military coup with the oil industry being nationalized. When oil prices declined in the 1980s, the economic situation in BOGALAND deteriorated, with a corresponding drop in living standards, especially in Mida province. As a result, civil unrest ensued, spreading throughout the country. By 1999, the situation became so unstable that a mutiny occurred within the armed forces of BOGALAND, mostly among units originating from Mida province. The resulting hostilities between the mutineers and government forces quickly developed into civil war. As the conflict spread, encompassing even the island of Gotland, BOGALAND became divided along ethnic lines. With the nation spiraling further and further into turmoil, the number of casualties within the civilian population rose, as did the suffering of all the people in the region. Eventually, BOGALAND fell into anarchy, and in 2012 and 2013, general unrest within the population led to mass demonstrations, resulting in violent clashes between civilians and the military. Once again, BOGALAND was in the middle of a civil war, involving many different ethnic groups. This split even the Kosuria region along provincial borders. But there did arise some hope. In June of 2013, a ceasefire was signed between the warring factions. Part of the agreement stipulated that a NATO peacekeeping force, known as B4, would be deployed to BOGALAND in October 2013 as part of UN Resolution 5019. By December, after intense international mediation and pressure, a peace agreement was signed. This agreement laid the foundation for another UN Resolution 5027, authorizing the establishment of the United Nations Mission in BOGALAND, or UNMIB, as well as the authorization of the EU Battle Group, or EUBG, to be used in the region. With these initiatives enacted, by the end of 2013, the transitional government of BOGALAND was successfully in place. As 2014 began, all seemed well enough that B4 handed over jurisdiction of the province of West Mida to the UNMIB. But no sooner had this taken place that some factions took this as an opportunity to seize control of the entire area during the transition and resulting power vacuum. Consequently, in March, the EU Battle Group was deployed to Mida province to stabilize the situation. Our reporter, Susan Becker, is at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, to give us more on this story.
Robert, as you mentioned, 10 years of ethnic clashes and turmoil have shattered the once peaceful and prosperous nation of BOGALAND. An international force under NATO command, B4, is since 180 days deployed in BOGALAND to sustain the peace process and suppress the humanitarian crisis. Mr. John Ryden, you are the NATO coordinator for the multinational peace efforts in BOGALAND. Recent reports indicate a rapid deterioration of the security situation. Will NATO really be able to sustain the fragile peace process?
Yes, I'm sure. The new violence we see in many areas are about control over assets, such as gold and diamonds, which are easy to hide and smuggle. B4 is a highly qualified force and trained for this type of situations. On a higher level, though, this is not only about military capabilities, but a sustainable solution has to come through combined political and military measures and a joint position of all involved parties. United Nations mission in BOGALAND has the lead, and it will take time, cooperation and persistence.
Time and persistence, you say, but the people of BOGALAND are longing for their suffering to finally end now that B4 is in place. What, in your opinion, are the main obstacles?
We are operating in an extremely fragmented environment, and there's a long history of mistrust between different groups. We will send a clear message that the protection of all sectors and all groups in BOGALAND is a central task. B4 is an important tool in enforcing the political process and the necessary overhaul of the security sector.
Finally, Mr. Ryden, what is the latest update on the B4 activities in BOGALAND right now?
B4 units are now establishing a security matrix that will prevent irregular forces from operating. We are closely monitoring the security situation in endangered communities. B4 has widespread support in BOGALAND and the North Friendly Sea area, and we will continue our work to earn the trust that we see in this.
Mr. John Ryden, NATO coordinator for the multinational peace efforts in BOGALAND. Thank you. As tension is rising in BOGALAND, will NATO succeed in their mission? We will continue to report on this international crisis. This is Susan Becker for TV16 News at NATO headquarters in Brussels.
Thank you, Susan. NATO is not the only organization heavily involved in BOGALAND. The entire mission is led by the United Nations. On the telephone with us today is Per Innerud, spokesperson for the United Nations mission in BOGALAND. Mr. Innerud, how do you see the UNMIB's role in working together with other international forces in BOGALAND?
Obviously, the UN is welcoming the presence of additional international actors. UN is promoting a comprehensive approach among all relevant actors. That means a coherent effort, a long-time commitment in cooperation with the transitional government, with international actors such as NATO, the EU and the civil society of BOGALAND. Certainly the entire international community need to cooperate to support the people of BOGALAND. There's a need to help them to build institutions, to reform the security sector, to ensure the rule of law and to stimulate the economy. We have a large job ahead of us and we need to work together to make it happen.
And how is the UN working with the government of BOGALAND?
UN is supporting the transitional government of BOGALAND to create a stable and sustainable future for the population of BOGALAND. In this process, it's important to ensure that the rights of women, girls, men and boys are taken into consideration, are included in the peace-building process. We are taking special consideration to the provisions outlined in the Security Council Resolution 1325, which focuses on parts of the society who are all too often excluded in peace building, that is, women and girls.
Mr. Innerud, thank you for bringing us the civilian perspective on this complex mission. Before the deployment of B4, countless numbers of civilians displaced by the fighting had already begun streaming into refugee camps throughout the region. According to the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, many of these camps remain overcrowded and in dire need to this day. Josh Lynn, our correspondent in Exland, is on location to give us more on this situation in one of these refugee camps. Josh, what can you tell us?
I'm standing at the entrance of an overcrowded refugee camp here in Exland. The first thing that hits you when you arrive is the overwhelming feeling of despair among those that have taken refuge and still live here. I've seen families of 5 to 6 people living in a worn-out canvas tent big enough to fit one person. The camp has one central area for toilet facilities, cooking, and fresh water. As the camp is overpopulated, these amenities are overloaded, resulting in malnourishment and disease. Camp staff is worried that time is running out. Because of fear of retaliation, most people are reluctant to talk to us. But one brave young woman, Anna, is willing to share her story. Anna, can you tell us why you're here?
It all started when our former mayor in our hometown in East Kasuria was killed by soldiers. The chief of police was also killed, and the soldiers burned his house down. When people tried to help, they were beaten really bad. And the soldiers, they said that those that had been involved with the old government, they could reach the same fate. So we were really afraid. And the soldiers came back and they kept beating people. Since we had no friends or family in another town, this was the only place where we could go.
Can you tell us what the situation was like here in camp? What is your daily life like here?
It's filthy, it's overcrowded, and we have to stand in line for hours to get water. And people are getting sick, and some have even died. And I've heard that the B4 has stopped the violence, but I don't know if that's true. If it is true, I would really, really like to go home again. And I think everybody else wants it too.
Thank you for sharing your story with us, Anna. We wish you good luck. Thanks. Anna's story is the same story as all the other people here who have left their homes to seek protection. As I see this vast camp and all the people here, I can't help but wonder what will happen when the families, elderlies, and children start their treacherous journey back to their homes. For TV16 News, this is Josh Len reporting to you from a refugee camp in Exland.
Thank you, Josh. As frustration rises over the escalating violence committed by armed bands roaming throughout BOGALAND, many in the military and police are stating that their highest priority must be to seek out and prosecute those responsible. However, one irregular military force accused of committing such violence, the Gutta Rams of Gotland, is claiming it is the other way around. They state that it is the B4 intervention that is illegal. We've arranged a unique look into this situation from representatives of both sides. With us via satellite is Roland Stark, a leader of the Gutta Rams, and Inspector Chris Robertson, spokesperson for the B4 military police. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today. Inspector Robertson, we'll begin with you. What is your assessment of the current situation?
Well, the situation looks different in different areas of the region. Right now, for example, we have challenges on Gotland, where the Gutta Rams are impeding the UN peace agreement by continuing an illegal armed behavior. By acting in this manner, they are effectively destroying the possibilities for the people of Gotland to enjoy peace and security, which of course is not acceptable.
Mr. Stark, you obviously see the situation differently. Why are your forces still fighting and not abiding by the peace agreement?
Peace agreement? There is no peace agreement for the people of Gotland. What's going on here is an illegal violent invasion by foreign enemy forces that have no legal right to be here on Gotland. It's not we who create violence. It's B4 who are the aggressors, and we have the right by international law to protect ourselves when attacked.
Inspector Robertson, some interesting points raised by Mr. Stark. Any validity to what he is saying? Do people have the right to protect themselves against what they see as an armed invasion of their country by a foreign military power?
Oh, absolutely. However, nobody has the right to violate international humanitarian conventions. And I would like to remind Mr. Stark that our presence is mandated by a UN resolution, which is supported by the interim government of BOGALAND. Armed interference against the multinational peace process is therefore a violation of international law and must stop immediately.
Mr. Stark, your own group has been a party in creating the peace agreement and the UN resolution. Why this change?
Well, foreigners who know nothing about the people of Gotland, they can write all the resolutions they want. These papers don't represent my people and are therefore useless. I warn the occupation forces and everyone who is in cooperation with them. No matter how many soldiers you bring, when you go home, we will still be here. And know this is our country, and we will fight for it.
Mr. Stark, Inspector Robertson, thank you both for joining us today and sharing your views on this most challenging situation in BOGALAND.
Thank you very much.
As we can see, different perspectives exist in regards to the meaning of many aspects of the peace accord in BOGALAND. The question is, does B4 and the police possess the resources necessary to stop the armed bands of irregular military forces, the actions of which are very close to derailing this peace agreement? We want to continue this edition of Special Report by bringing you a story about one of the most serious threats faced by both civilians and soldiers of B4 and BOGALAND. Mines and unexploded ordnances, or UXOs, left in the ground from previous conflicts continue to kill and injure on a daily basis. The situation for the troops there is extremely hazardous. Every day they risk their lives disarming thousands of mines and other explosive devices created for no other purpose than to kill. Sherry Rogers is in BOGALAND with this report on the men and women who face this danger daily.
Today I'm live with the B4 unit here in BOGALAND. I'll be speaking to the unit that is responsible for disarming the mines and explosives. Can you describe what's happening here?
Yeah,
Right now we are clearing this field to make it possible for the farmers to go back and start growing crops again. It's important because the field is needed to produce food for the refugee camps. And how long do you think this is going to take, your unit? We are able to search about 1 square meter per minute. So if we look at the total area, I think it will take about 2 weeks before we can let the farmers onto the fields again. 2 weeks, that's a long time for people to be without food.
Yeah, that is correct. The UXO problem here in BOGALAND is huge. We only have so many units and we're working night and day, but sometimes it just feels like there's no end to it.
Thank you for your time today. Back to you, Robert.
Thank you, Sherry. As we have seen, the international community continues to invest heavily in BOGALAND. The question is, will it be enough? Will the combination of all the efforts of the UN, EU, and B4 be able to finally put a stop to the human tragedy in this region of the North Friendly Sea area? That remains uncertain. Thank you for joining us. Continue watching TV16 News for the latest updates on this and other developing stories. I'm Robert Rohr.